There are stories the Vlka Fenryka dare not sing. They say Fenris is a death world, but the truth lies deeper than volcanic oceans and predatory moons. Beneath the ice, beneath the roots of the Fang, there are vaults older than the Allfather's gaze. Some were carved by the hands of Russ's first pack. Others were not. The Space Wolves are hunters, warriors of honor, bound by saga and kin. But even they do not name everything they have slain. Some howls are never answered. Some echoes do not return from the mountain's depths. When a brother vanishes on the edge of a dream, and the air smells of ash beneath the frost, they look to the fire, and they wait. This is the tale of Vlka, a rune priest marked by the stars, and the squad who followed him into the belly of the Fang. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but because the Fang itself had begun to breathe. It is not a saga found in song. It is not told around the hearth, but some still remember the howl that did not come from a wolf. I could not see the moon. I thought the sky had swallowed it, but the howl still came. It was not our kin, not wolfen, not even beast. It mourned. And then it listened. The file ends with 14 seconds of heartbeat static. This recording was recovered near the remnants of an inactive teleportarium hub beneath the Fang. The air was dry, no frost remained, no bodies were found, only a length of claw-scratched granite and a saga speaker's chain still bearing his name. The runes were unreadable. The warp did not reclaim them. The mountain simply stopped holding them. Those who reviewed the log reported no abnormalities, but none returned to the same quarters that night. Each relocated to different halls. None explained why. The mountain waits still, and the silence beneath it remembers. Fenris was silent. Not in the way the void is silent, not in the way death makes a chamber still. This was the silence of something breathing beneath you. The air above the Fang's spires tasted of copper that morning. Not blood exactly, just close enough to memory. Initiate Brian was the first to go missing. He had been tasked with snow walk patrol along the outer ridges, past the 9th marker stone where the winds snarl but do not bite. His Vox link faded mid-check-in. No distress call, no warp flare, no echo. By the time the second pack reached his last coordinates, the snow was undisturbed. Even his scent was gone. The rune priest said nothing. The wolf lords assumed the storm was to blame. Fenris did not weep for the lost. But Vlka, who had trained Brian in blade forms and hearth lore, heard something that night. The wind whistled strangely through the high canines of the Fang's facade. A second tone beneath it pulsed low and off rhythm, like a growl waiting to shape itself into a word. Vlka did not sleep. The fire in his chamber swayed as if something had passed near it, but no shadow followed. Only the scent of old fur and cold stone. In the morning, his breath tasted like rust. 3 more initiates vanished within the week. Their assignments had been scattered, one in the observatory, another in the mid-spine tunnels, the third near the echo chambers used during Morkai rites. No signs of struggle, no equipment disturbed, no blood. Each disappearance occurred during lone hours, and each time, the wind outside rose just slightly before their final Vox check. Vlka began walking the outer vault rings alone. He did not report his movements. He did not need to. His rank and weird gift gave him leeway most others feared to question. He wore his runic pelt close to the skin and carried a torch made not of heat light, but bone-lit tallow, an old rite, older than most remembered. Some said he had gone too long without pilgrimage. Others whispered that he had not come back fully from his last journey to Asaheim's core, but no one challenged him when he stood silent at the edge of the chapel vault and asked nothing from the Allfather, just listened. He began hearing the howls more clearly on the third night. They came during the gap between the third and fourth watch, when even the youngest remembered not to speak aloud unless summoned. The sound rolled low and long, distant, without source. Not Wolfen, not Fenrisian, not even lupine. The howl bent at the end, curling back in on itself like a name misremembered. Others began to hear it too. A skald named Grevi claimed to hear singing behind it, like voices buried in the wind. He did not say this with fear. He spoke it as if it pained him to remember. Initiates stopped gathering around the central hearth at night. Not by order. They simply wandered less. Jests grew shorter. The saga recitals stumbled more often, and no one corrected them. The air in the lower halls changed. Warmth lingered longer than it should have. The forges sputtered in the middle of recitations. The statue of Russ in the reclusium began to drip moisture from the eyes, as if the ice had begun to weep without thaw. By the fifth night, Vlka summoned his former squad. They gathered in the hall of pale shields, each seated beneath their own crest. No armor, no weapons, just the silence of familiarity. None spoke immediately. It was Kalig, the oldest among them, who broke the quiet. We never heard that sound during the Tyrannid Wars, not even in orbit, not on Cardia, never from any more but one made of flesh and rage. Vlka nodded. It isn't a beast, he said. It wants to be, but it remembers what it was. Morda, the fire-eyed berserker, who had once thrown a chaos sorcerer into a glacial pit by hand, spoke slower than usual. Are we being hunted? No, Vlka replied. We are being mourned. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. The runes carved into the chamber walls hummed slightly. They were meant to record sound for sagas. None of them had been activated. Later that night, Vlka sat alone beneath the oath stone of the first hunt. It was a relic said to bleed when dishonor approached. It did not bleed, but something beneath it moved. Not a tremor, a shifting. He placed his palm to the stone. The warmth that rose through the palm of his hand was unmistakable. Life, or something close to it. But it did not beat like a heart. It pulsed like a name being forgotten. When he pulled his hand away, runes had formed across his fingertips. Not inked, not scarred, just present, as if they had always been there. He spoke the words aloud, and far beneath the Fang something answered. Runa priest Vlka did not dream the way mortals do. For most warriors of Fenris, sleep is a place of memory and frost. A den of old hunts. The roar of waves beneath an aurora sky. Battles replayed with spears sharpened by youth and fire. But for Vlka, who had touched the weird, who bore the psychic mark of the Allfather's deeper war, sleep was not a passage inward. It was a bleeding outward. Every dream dragged his thoughts into deeper tides, where minds touched minds, and visions walked unshod across the souls of the dead. Through flame runes, through memory stone, he had walked many vision paths. He had crossed the halls of his ancestors in light shaped like wolves, and listened to Russ's wrath carved into flame. He had read futures written in blood vapor, and heard the laughter of old gods echo from the warp. But nothing prepared him for this. Not even the sagas spoke of a flame that stares back. The fire pit in his chamber had gone cold. That was the first sign. There had been no gust, no rush of wind through the chimney, no failing of fuel. The logs burned still. Their shape remained as he left them, arranged with ceremonial care, each branch from the sacred black pine groves of Kvarnheim, each bound in oilcloth marked with fire glyphs. Yet the flame had changed. It no longer flickered. No hiss of sap crack or melting tallow. The logs had not blackened. They hadn't shifted at all. The flame burned in a perfect circle, flat, motionless, a coin of red-gold light pressed beneath the low ceiling stones. It did not cast shadows. It did not sway with breath or heat. It simply watched. He stared into it long after the hour of rest. He blinked once and found himself standing in the Hall of Runes. The chamber should not have returned to him. He had not set foot in it since his initiation beneath the blood moon of his ascension rites. That memory, engraved by sweat and sacred trial, had remained sealed by ride and guess. The hall was meant for First Flame only, never again. But here it stood, unchanged yet wrong. Its carved pillars loomed higher than before, and the breath of frost clung not just to the floor, but to the air itself. The torches flared dimly, casting no warmth. The air rang with something wet, not rain, not dripping. Breath. The sound of lungs pressed too close behind him. Somewhere in the frost, footsteps cracked, not with weight, but with age. Someone else breathed there. Vlka turned to face the presence, but saw only the fire again. It was not a vision, not truly. Visions in the weird leave patterns, signs to read. This was a loop, a snare within the veil, a circle that refused to open. He reached for the charm at his neck. A fang yellowed with time, carved with flame runes. It had been gifted to him by his mentor, Jorvald, before his final hunt into the Eye of Terror. Jorvald had not returned, but his fang had. Recovered from the ruins of a shrine world lost in warpfire. No blood remained on it. Only soot and silence. Vlka pressed the fang between finger and thumb. It cracked. There was no sound. No pressure. It snapped as if some force within it had been holding its shape too long. As if the memory trapped inside had finally escaped. His breath caught in his throat. Not from fear, from recognition. This was no dream. It was a watching. Something behind the veil had leaned forward, not reached, not touched, just inclined itself, as if to see more clearly. The next day, the initiates were quieter, not from discipline, not from command. Something hung in the air between them, more than dread. 4 had reported dreams that night. Each had gone to different halls, each to different fire scribes. Yet when the words were read aloud the next morning, they mirrored each other. Red moons that do not cast light. A river beneath stone singing. Flames that whisper names wrong. The phrasing differed, but the essence did not. These were not mere night terrors. These were echoes. The scribes, uncertain how to interpret the visions, entered the accounts in black ink, not red. Black was reserved for events that held ambiguity of ritual meaning, signs unverified, omens not yet assigned to a god's favor or fury. Vlka read each one. None had spoken to each other. None had shared quarters. But each had felt it. He gathered 3 battle brothers from his old company. Veterans, trusted. These were not green bloods. They had walked with him into the jaws of demon worlds and stood beside him during the Death Watch campaigns. Morda, who bore a scar that split his scalp from eye to crown. Yarn, who never spoke, but whose kill record read like saga. And Beoric, steady-handed and hollow-eyed, his faith not fervent, but unbreakable. Their armor bore scratches from every corner of the segmentum obscurus. Their faces did not age, but they carried the weight of understanding. That weight moved with them now, wordless, down into the deep levels of the Fang. Beneath the vaults of Russ's kin, beyond the statue halls and the sealed crypts of honored dead, there were tunnels. Not all were marked. Some bore seals so old that no artificer could recall who etched them. Some glowed faintly, not with the power of the Mechanicus, but with something older. Sigils carved not for the eye, but for memory. Here, the stone changed. The mortar ran with veins of gold bone. Not ore, not mineral. Something else. When Vlka reached out and placed a palm on one of the symbols, it pulsed. A brief rhythm, too fast to be a heartbeat, too slow for static. But in that pulse he heard something, his own voice, not spoken, not thought, echoed from behind his sight. A whisper carried from flame. He staggered back. Yarn caught his shoulder, but said nothing. He had seen the flame too, in his chamber, in his breath. They pressed deeper into the Fang's oldest layers. The stone grew warm. Not warm like heat rising from forge fires, not warm like breath in winter. This was pressure, something rising behind the walls, not gravity, not vibration. Waiting. They reached the final vault. It had once been an observation chamber, a place to watch orbital ice drifts during the time of wraiths. No records marked it as sacred. It had not been opened in decades. Ice sealed the arch, not frost from the outside. This was breath ice, the kind that forms from blood, from presence sealed too long. Morda shattered it. His hammer bore the brand of Fenrisian flame. Runes etched into its head glowed faintly as he brought it down. The ice split, the door groaned, and the chamber revealed itself. Black stone, smooth as warplate, veined with gold bone like the passageways behind them. The air was still, silent, but not empty. At the chamber's center, a brazier stood, still lit. Its flame did not flicker. A perfect circle, red gold, flat. The same flame they had seen in their dreams, the same watching eye. They circled it slowly. Around the brazier were scattered fragments of bone, long, twisted, inorganic. Solon dropped to one knee, scanning. Not human, he said. Not Xenos. Not anything we've recorded. The bones were patterned with strange striations, grooves too fine for natural growth, as if they had once belonged to something not born, but shaped. Something that had hunted not as beast or warrior, but as a weapon. Morda stepped forward, his eyes welled. He did not flinch, did not blink, but moisture ran down his cheek, slow and steady. "Why does it feel like morning?" he asked, voice hollow. No one answered. Vlka reached for the flame. He expected heat. There was none. Not less, none. The warmth that should have driven them back disappeared, and with it, all sound. The flame remained, yet the chamber grew cold. So cold the stone beneath them rang. A note pitched low, too low for ears but not for bone. It climbed their spines, set the inner ear to trembling. And then a voice came. Not a whisper, not words. Runes, shapes branded into thought, etched into marrow, carved not in language, but in sensation. The feeling of flame, the memory of ash, the weight of a name never spoken aloud. Vlka fell to one knee, the others remained standing. Their breathing slowed, their hearts held steady. They had not heard the voice. Only he had. It was not from the warp, not from any man. It was an old fire, one that had waited. Vlka looked up, and the flame bowed toward him. He turned to his brothers. His throat felt thick, but the words came without effort. The mountain remembers. Outside, the wind began to howl. It should have sounded like winter, sharp, clean, but it didn't. It moaned through the halls of the Fang, bending low, like something vast dragging its limbs across stone. It did not sound like wind at all. The descent began before they left the upper vaults. Something in the minds of the 4 space wolves had already tilted inward. Vlka led, but it wasn't the path he remembered. The tunnels bent slightly wrong, not enough to be noticed by those untrained in the geography of the Fang, but enough for the old hunter's instinct to claw at him in silence. Morder walked second. His axe remained sheathed, though his knuckles had turned bone-white along the haft. He had stopped sleeping 2 nights before, not from fear. The dreams had simply vanished, replaced by a white stillness that pulsed behind his eyes each time he blinked. They did not speak. It was not that words failed. There was simply no room for them. The tunnel ahead opened into a lesser vault, uncharted by archivists and unblessed by the reclusium. No record named its shape. No rites covered its opening. But the air was warm, and the snow that dusted the stones underfoot had not come from above. It was falling upward, drawn toward the ceiling, like ash reversing its death. The stone here was not of Fenris. It was black-veined, reflecting no light. Even torch flame seemed absorbed. Vlka bent low, pressing one gloved hand against the floor. He expected frost, perhaps tremor. Instead, it was dry. Not just dry, ancient. The texture held a memory that refused to belong to any world born in real space. And beneath his palm, the faintest hum. Not of machine, not of warp. A sound like breath held too long. He rose and turned to the others. The squad's eyes were not on him. They were fixed on the far wall, where a mural spread out in low relief. A beast stood there, wolven in stance, but wrong in shape. Its hind legs bent with the posture of supplication. The jaw was open far too wide, unhinged without force, tongue hanging not down but rising, curled back toward an unseen moon. The eyes had no pupils, only spiral carvings that gave the illusion of movement when stared at too long. Kaleg stepped forward. "These are not our kin." He said it without emotion, more observation than warning. Vlka nodded. He had seen this shape once, long ago, in a lost ruin deep beneath the outer reaches of Asserheim. Not etched, dreamed. A vision he had buried in silence. He now realized the dream had not been sent. It had been remembered. A scratching came then, not sharp, a low drag like fur over stone. They turned in unison. At the edge of the vault stood a cairn, not made of bones, not metal, shaped from claws. Claws fused together, curved and set into a spiral cone that seemed to deny angles. At its base was a slab of the same black stone, smooth, unbroken, and set into its surface, shallow as a whisper, a single bloodstain. Still wet. Vlka stepped closer. The scent hit him before he could kneel. Not just blood, familiar blood. Fenrisian. He placed one hand on the slab. The stone did not resist. It gave. A hollow sound issued from beneath, as if breath escaped a throat long sealed. The slab split. Darkness billowed upward, not shadow, but absence. It crawled along the ceiling, curling with slow, graceful motion, as if remembering how to move. Beneath the slab was a staircase of melted bone, steps uneven, shaped by hands not built for symmetry. Each tread bore a different rune. None repeated. They began to descend. With each step the air grew colder, not from temperature, but memory. They passed through a hollow veil that pulled at their breath. Words failed here not from silence, but from the refusal of the space to carry them. They reached the base. A dome stretched above them. It was vast, impossible to measure with sight alone. The ceiling was carved to resemble the surface of Fenris, inverted and full of flame. No map matched the contours. Oceans where there should be stone. Storms where there should be silence. In the center stood a monolith. It was not made. It had grown. Twisted and tall, black with veins of memory rune, it pulsed with something older than life. At its base were tokens, rings, weapons, fragments of armor. Some marked with the wolf, others with sigils long banned from use. The squad moved forward without command. Each reached the base. Vlka knelt. The flame behind his sight began to grow. Not fire, a heat of purpose. He placed one hand on the monolith. For a moment, he was not on Fenris. He was in orbit, above a world that resembled his own, but was not. A world that howled without surface. A planet of mouths, each chanting in rhythm with a heartbeat that shaped the void. He gasped, returned. The others looked to him. Kaleg's voice was rough. "Do you still call this place holy?" Vlka did not answer. Outside the vault, snow began to fall upward again. And far above, the Fang did not tremble, but it breathed. They did not return by the same path. The bone stairs behind them had folded into the earth, not collapsed, withdrawn like a memory choosing to end. The black stone vault sealed without sound, and the rune that once marked it dulled to ash beneath their feet. No Oathkeeper had followed. No rites had guided them. The Fang above did not notice they had ever left. In the Hall of Skulls, the fire had gone out, not extinguished, replaced. A new flame burned low and pale, not orange, not blue. Something in between, a thin pale flicker that gave light but no warmth. Its glow filled the room with long shadows. These stretched and bent without direction, mimicking movements no one made. None of the elders spoke. Their tongues itched with silence. Vlka stood in the corner, beneath the great tusks of Russ's hunt throne. He watched them all. The Skalds, the oath-bound lawkeepers, the bloodline singers. Each refused to look toward the hearth. Not from fear, from memory. There was something in the fire that reminded them of a tale none had told, a death none had named. Grevi, oldest among them, took his seat without his staff. That had not happened in 2 centuries. He cleared his throat once, then again, then closed his eyes. "What we do not sing," he said, "still waits to be remembered." The others remained still. No censure followed, no chant, no howl to mark the start of a saga. Just the thin voice of a man too old for fear. There was once a silence beneath Fenris, older than Russ, older than man, older than even the beasts we now name for pride. It did not feed, it did not move, it did not hate, it only waited. Not in the dark, but in memory, where no one can bury it without remembering the shape of its grave. The shadows flickered. Grevi continued. When the first hunters came, before the Allfather's flame, before the first stone wolf carved Fang from flesh, they found a song in the ice. Not words, not even sound, just rhythm, a heartbeat shaped like a howl. One of the younger Skalds began to shake. He pressed his hand to his mouth. Blood trailed down his palm, not from injury, from biting back a name. Grevi opened his eyes. We never sang the full saga, not because we feared it, because it never ended. It could not be told without finishing what it began. Kaleg stepped forward from the shadows. What name does it bear? Grevi looked at him, as if from a long distance. It does not bear one. It is the name that carries others. Vlka turned to the fire. Its shape had changed, not suddenly. The curve of the flame now resembled a mouth, open but not speaking. A hollow grin caught in slow breath. He whispered, "Why now?" Grevi answered without turning, "Because something remembered us." The silence that followed was not complete. From somewhere below the hearthstones, a slow sound rose. Not a howl, a deep, wet drag, as if something had begun to pull itself forward. Vlka moved to the edge of the flame and placed his hand over the light. The fire did not burn, it cooled. He saw, not through the flame, but into it. Visions moved, not of future, of past unclaimed. The Fang as it once was, a mountain uncut, its base wrapped in storm and screaming wind. At its center, a pit, dug not by man or beast, but by memory collapsing into shape. Within it, figures, not wolves, not men. Shapes of muscle, too long in limb, with faces that bore no eyes. Their mouths opened slowly, within each one, a second mouth, and within that, the shape of a rune, one that shimmered with every tongue that ever spoke it. Vlka staggered back. The fire returned to normal. No one moved. Outside, the wind rose, and with it the howling began again. This time, it came from beneath. The vaults shook, not with force, with grief. The stones mourned in silence. Grevi stood. He turned toward the flame and raised his arms, not in praise, but in surrender. "We never sang the ending," he said. And as the howl deepened, Vlka knew they would. When the Fang was first raised above the spine of Asserheim, there were screams beneath the earth. The mountain did not yield willingly. Its bones resisted, stone splintered with echoes that mimicked no tectonic rhythm. Even the iron-blooded Fenrisians, hardened by centuries of survival, knew that this land was not only shaped by violence, but remembered it. Ice flowed upward from within, cold not born of temperature, but of pressure unmeasured by any earthly law. No iron priest recorded the way frost clung to their limbs in those first days. No skald carved the warnings that etched themselves across sealed vaults and black caverns. And the rune priests, they did not speak what they heard. They stood at the mountain's threshold and listened. That was all they did. That was all they could do. And now the pulse had returned. Vlka stood at the entrance to the descent. His hand brushed the vault rune set into the arch, one older than the chapter, older than the Imperium, older perhaps than Fenris itself. It was not a seal. It was not protection. It was memory, waiting to be touched again. 3 followed behind him. Kaleg, stalwart and grim. Morda, the wild-eyed berserker whose voice had grown quieter with every dream. And Grevi, the saga speaker whose fire had not flickered since the Hall of Skalds had wept. There were places beneath the Fang the chapter did not name. No maps marked these corridors. No rites sanctified their halls. Some were closed by accident, others by instinct. The 4 of them passed beneath carved thresholds and entered the grey sanctums. They crossed beyond the reach of light that flickered according to human needs. Here, no torches were lit, no machine spirits hummed, and the silence was not still. It listened. Every breath, every step returned as a pressure behind the skull. Not echo, not reflection, but presence. Stone teeth framed their passage, not sculpted. Grown, basalt and slate twisted into natural spirals, narrowing the path with every step. The formation felt deliberate, yet bore no sign of tool or heat. Each twist a narrowing of space, of thought, of possibility. The deeper they moved, the more their autosenses collapsed. Not failed, not disrupted. They simply stopped functioning, as if they no longer knew how to interpret what surrounded them. Auspex read no mass. Vox relayed no signal. Biosensors ticked backward. Kaleg whispered that he could hear his own heartbeat being echoed wrong. Not reversed, not staggered, but rewritten. His words trailed into the frost. At the corridor's end, stone gave way to something older than form. The ceiling broke open above them into a cavern vast and silent. The floor sloped downward, framed by walls that shimmered faintly with cold. Not the glint of water or frost, but memory mineralized into something that pulsed. A low rhythm filled the space, not from air, from meaning. Vlka stepped forward. The stone beneath his boots did not crack. It responded. Beneath his feet, runes shifted, not visibly, not aloud, only in sensation. Each movement redrew the weight of his purpose, pulled it tighter. Not like fate, like gravity. This place was not just old, it was heavy with intention. Morda touched the wall and flinched. His hand recoiled as if burned, though his skin bore no mark. A sheen of dust clung to his glove. He scraped it free. The dust sparkled faintly, not silver, not gold. Bone dust, not from creature or corpse, ground from something once vast, once alive, once still thinking. The chamber opened wider. At its center stood a basin, shallow and circular, carved from a single slab of obsidian rimmed with molten ivory. Runes circled its edge, some Fenrisian, some Terran in shape, but most defied tongue or script. Vlka recognized none, yet understood them all, not as language, but as memory. Memory not his own, but known. Grevi approached first. His breath caught, not from fear, from remembering something he had never been told. He knelt beside the basin and placed his palm near its rim. No contact, no pressure, only proximity. And still the basin responded. Its interior shimmered like heated glass, but emitted no warmth. Vlka joined him. Inside the basin, no liquid waited, no oil, no flame. It was dry. But within the black curvature, something moved. A shape flickered. Then another. Not reflection, not light. A story. A sequence of events that lived only in the bones of the mountain. The wolf that is not. Its form was unclear, not hidden, but indescribable. Part shadow, part sound. Its movement echoed the gestures of a creature with limbs and breath and hunger, but it bore no flesh, no teeth, no eyes. Where one might find organs, there was only rhythm, and within its center, mouths. Not singular, not overlapping. Mouths within mouths, each bearing a rune. The same rune repeated endlessly, forming a spiral too intricate to draw. That rune had no name, yet it ruled every language spoken in the Fang. Morda staggered. The basin had not touched him, but his bones remembered. His voice cracked open. He spoke a name that had never been given to him, not his own, but one shaped from saga lines and blood. A name born before Fenris was ever named. Vlka reached toward the basin. His fingers grazed the edge. No pain, no heat, only sensation. A pressure built behind his eyes. The world narrowed, then cracked. He saw the first Fenrisians, not warriors, not even tribes. Just figures, bowed in ice, wandering beneath auroras that knew no direction. They did not hunt, they fled. Not from beasts, from a silence. A thing that moved in rhythm. Not footsteps, not roar, just breath. A shape made of hunger that did not eat. It drank names, and every time it reached them, stories died. Not people, not lives, stories. Entire generations forgotten, not buried, erased. No saga sang of them, no ashes burned for them. The silence had consumed the soul, and the soul was made of tail. He gasped and fell back. Kaleg caught him. Behind them, the chamber pulsed. The glow dimmed slightly. Above their heads, dust fell, not randomly. It fell in patterns, like runes burned into ash. The ceiling was not stone. It was bone. They had not entered a chamber. They had entered a skull so large its dimensions defied scale. Its bone calcified into mineral, its inner hollows etched with a language of forgetting. The basin rested in its mouth. The stone began to hum again. Grevi stood. His voice broke the silence. This is not a place built by memory. It is a place that builds it. Vlka turned to face the wall. Runes bloomed outward. Each one marked a saga no longer told. Some he recognized. His mentor's campaign in the Stormclaw's uprising. A raid beneath the burning ice of Traeger Deep. Others he had never heard, and yet his body knew them. They danced through his blood like inherited shame. A spiral unfolded beneath their feet, not visible, sensory. With every heartbeat, new sequences emerged, not chronological, not linear, interwoven. Vlka stepped deeper into the spiral. He saw the battle for Cadia, but the sky bore no ships. The void sang without war. Then a mirror of Fenris, its surface covered in flame, orbiting a second sun made of mouths. Then the Fang itself, inverted, resting on an ocean of ash that screamed. The spiral drew him down, and in that descent, he realized this was not a memory. It was a rehearsal. The Fang had been prepared to remember something before it ever happened. It had waited for it. It had shaped its chambers, its silence, its bones to receive a story that had yet to arrive. And now it had. Vlka turned. Kaleg knelt at the base of the basin, eyes vacant but open. Morda whispered names he had never learned. Grevi stood still, but his shadow had bent the wrong way. They were changing, not physically, inwardly. Their presence had become aligned with the rhythm of the mountain, not by fate, by agreement. None of them would leave unchanged. Vlka looked up. The ceiling shimmered again. A mouth opened in the stone, not mechanically, as if memory had sighed, and from that mouth the howl began. It did not roar. It did not cry. It simply was. It filled the space between breath. It lived in the space behind thought. It had always been part of them. They had simply forgotten. Now it was time to remember. Vlka stepped to the center of the skull chamber and spoke the rune aloud. Not phonetically, not verbally, but in essence, through breath shaped like story. And the mountain listened. Its bones shifted. A corridor opened. Not new, just uncovered. He turned to his brothers. They followed, and the descent continued. He stood alone within the mountain's hollow, not merely within the Fang, but beneath its breath, where frost had forgotten to cling, and memory hung heavier than stone. The wind moved through broken crevice mouths above, a whisper shaped like a blade's edge, thin and deliberate, a sound that had less to do with air and more to do with things lost beneath it. There were no runes here to mark warning. No shrine welcomed him. No oath stone guarded the way. Only the curved slope of bones too old to name, fused into arch and alcove alike, and the weight of breath unspoken by those who once walked this way and had chosen silence instead. The chamber bore no name in the records of the Fang, but it had shape, and that shape spoke, not in words, in pressure, in rhythm, in the stillness of the air between heartbeats. It welcomed not by gesture, but by the way it did not resist. Vlka crossed the threshold, and though his boots touched frost-worn stone, he felt no chill. The cold here was not physical. It had settled long ago into the marrow of the mountain, into the veins beneath thought, where warmth could not reach because it had never been born. Around him, the walls arched inward and upward in an impossible curve. Glyphs stretched along their surfaces, faint and winding, like veins of iron in old bone. They pulsed with a rhythm slower than breath, slower even than time, a pattern more felt than seen. The runes were not all Fenrisian. Some bore fragments of Terran proto-glyph, others echoed the tomb carvings once found in the black deserts of Mars, though these were older still, untouched by human memory and unclaimed by any known hand. They were not carved for eyes. They were meant to be remembered by something deeper, something that lived beneath language. Vlka moved forward and the floor shifted beneath him, subtly, like flesh remembering it had once been warm. It did not give way but resisted just enough to make each step an act of acknowledgement. He felt his breath grow shallower, not from fatigue, from resistance. The air pushed against his lungs, not with weight, but with age, as if it had been breathed before by others long buried and did not welcome change. Behind him came no sound, and yet he was not alone. The silence bent slightly, not broken, but adjusted, as if recognizing more than one presence now past. From the side vaults emerged Mordor and Kaleg, their approach wordless, armor dull and dust-covered, the color of ancient ash, the kind found in tombs that sealed themselves. Their expressions were unreadable, but their eyes had changed. They held something now, an echo perhaps, or a memory that had not been theirs until they walked the lower vaults. They did not look to Vlka, they looked to the chamber's center. There the floor fell away in a slow, circular spiral, a stair carved not by tool but by pressure, each step a ring of smooth stone descending into a dark that pulsed like breath held too long. No light marked its depth. No flame could illuminate what lay below, but something within that dark moved, slowly, as if exhaling. Vlka approached the first step. The stone felt warm, not in heat, but in intention, like something long buried that had begun to stir. He looked down and saw no bottom, only the curve of descent and the pressure of waiting. Without a word, he began to descend. The others followed, not as squadmates or warriors, but as witnesses, their silence no longer chosen, but required by the path itself. The stair turned slowly, coiling like a memory being unwound, each rotation drawing them deeper into the breath of the mountain. The air warmed, but not with comfort. It thickened, grew heavy with a scent like old iron and wet fire, the kind found in ships broken beneath sea pressure, or in graves sealed by heat instead of stone. Their armor grew heavier, not from burden, from resonance. Each plate seemed to vibrate softly, not with impact, but with memory. At the base of the spiral, they found not a room, but a space where architecture had surrendered. The chamber curved like a dome, smooth and perfect, lit from within by a glow that pulsed without source. Its light did not fall like illumination, but hovered, clinging to the air like breath too shy to leave the lungs. In the chamber's heart rose a sarcophagus, not of Astartes' design, nor imperial, nor alien. It rested atop a plinth shaped like a wolf's open jaw, and its sides bore a single rune, repeated in widening spirals. A rune with no name, no match in vault or memory. And yet all three recognized it. It had waited for them. Vlka stepped forward, and the chamber adjusted, not in movement, but in expectation, like a thought turned toward its speaker. His breath did not echo, but his pulse did. It resounded softly in his chest, aligning with a second beat just beneath it, a rhythm not his own, but familiar. The sarcophagus shimmered slightly, not with light, but with presence. Its surface was not metal, not stone. Something else, dense, patient, and listening. He placed a hand upon it. The rune beneath his palm pulsed once, slow and deliberate, as if confirming something long agreed upon. Morda moved to his side. His eyes had begun to weep, though not from grief. Something in the chamber filled him, flooded him, a presence that moved like memory unshackled from pain. Kaleg stood back, whispering prayers in tongues not his own, words pulled from sagas never sung. The lid of the sarcophagus shifted, not with noise, with allowance. It opened without motion, revealing not a body, but a space. Not hollow, not empty. A shape formed from absence, from breath held too long, from a howl never given. The cavity within pulsed gently, not in color, but in rhythm. No corpse lay there, no artifact, just the weight of something unsaid. From that space came the sound, a howl but not voiced, a presence shaped like sound but without vibration. It did not echo, it did not ring. It filled the space between heartbeats, between thoughts, between what could be known and what had always been. It reached inside them, not to take, not to wound, but to awaken something buried not in flesh, but in the space where their stories had ended and never been told. The howl was not plea or pain. It was not fear. It was recognition. Vlka staggered back, not from fear, from arrival. He knew it then, as did the others. This was not the crypt of a warrior, not a shrine to some forgotten god. It was a womb shaped by silence and filled with the memory of something that had never been allowed to be born. The rune was not a name. It was a breath, a shape that could only be spoken by those who had chosen to remain unremembered. He saw the Fang then, not as fortress, as vessel, a mountain grown around a wound, a shell built by instinct to cover the howl, and the howl had waited. Outside, wind struck the higher peaks, and for a moment the howl echoed through the Fang, not as wind, not as beast, but as the memory of breath withheld. No ears could trace its source, no soul could ignore its shape. Vlka turned to the sarcophagus. He did not speak. He listened. The others knelt, not from worship, from realization. The room darkened, not from shadow, but from saturation. The light had gone inward, had moved into them, into bone and oath and memory. They felt it. Each story they had ever sung, each saga, each word of triumph and sorrow. All of it recorded not in voice, but in the breath that had carried them. And now that breath returned. The howl grew louder, not in sound, in truth. And the Fang began to breathe again. Snow fell in spirals, not with haste, not with weight, but as if remembering how to land. Each flake turned once, then again, before settling atop stone long untouched by storm. The upper ridges of the Fang stood motionless beneath the thin veil of sky, their frozen jaws half buried in breathless white. Nothing stirred. No smoke curled from the watchfires. No footsteps pressed through the drifts. The fortress monastery of the Vlka Fenryka had not died, nor had it slept. It had listened, and now it watched. From the mountainside emerged one figure, alone. Vlka. The priest's silhouette broke through the last of the frostline arch, where stone veins pulsed faintly in rhythm with no light. The tunnel behind him had sealed. No clang of metal, no rune of closure. Simply stone returned to stillness. What had once been a descent was now no passage at all. Gone. as though memory had erased its shape rather than its presence. He walked forward slowly, breath tight, eyes unblinking. His furs hung heavy, laced with a sheen of frost that had not melted against skin. The snow did not cling to him, it waited on him, and it fell behind him differently than before. He walked without escort. No wolf trod at his side, no brother followed in his wake. Where three had descended into the hollow root of the world, only one emerged. But there had been no death. He bore no mourning band. His armor was unscarred, his pulse was steady. Still, something was gone, not just in body, but in sound. The air no longer bent around his passage the way it once had. The mountain had accepted something into itself, and returned only what it needed to finish the telling. The Fang's outer corridors greeted him with silence, not abandonment. The runes etched into the ice halls no longer sparked at his approach. They dimmed gently, the way eyes lower in reverence when a truth too large has passed by. Fires once lit for warmth flickered, but did not burn. No coals stirred. No cinders spoke. The heat had not vanished. It had simply chosen not to manifest. As if the halls knew. This was not a place for flame. Not yet. Vlka crossed the Reclusium's inner boundary without word or offering. No oath priest met him. The statues of Russ and his sons did not weep frost. Their visages seemed softer now, worn not by time, but by something older. Their eyes did not follow. Their blades no longer gleamed with ceremonial frost sheen. Something in their posture, stone though it was, felt less defiant, more resolved, as if what had slumbered beneath them had always made their saga possible. He passed beneath the wolf gate and paused, just once, beneath the iron fang carved by the first Skjald during the Age of Fire. The mouth above had once been carved open in a howl. Now, to Vlka's eye, it was listening. The howl still echoed, but only inward. The stone had heard something too vast to shape into song, and now it held that secret with pride, not fear. The vox chambers waited in stillness. Panels of golden steel shimmered with dormant runes. No message pulsed, no summons blinked. The chapter did not call to its kin, nor did it answer the wider Imperium's rhythms. For the first time in centuries, the Vox list bore no names waiting on transmission. No oaths pending renewal, just a single rune glowing low. Vlka's own. He placed one palm against the console. It responded not with alert, not with sequence, but with breath. A slow pulse throbbed beneath the interface, like a second heartbeat tuned to silence. Beneath his hand, the metal softened, not in texture, but in recognition, as if the console had waited for him specifically, not as a priest, not as a warrior, but as witness. A second rune shimmered next to his own. It was not catalogued. It had no name in the saga record. No wolf lord bore its shape. But it was old. Old enough to carry the taste of the first tongue, when man still spoke in instinct, and the stars listened without need of logic. The rune was incomplete, not broken, not flawed. It awaited its final stroke, and Vlka did not finish it. He turned and walked from the chamber. The door remained open. The console pulsed once more and dimmed. He passed the gene vaults in silence. They did not hiss. Their sacred samples remained sealed, untouched. But a shift had occurred. A change not in gene seed, but in the echo of its presence. The stasis lights now blinked slower. The resonance chambers no longer hummed in perfect rhythm. Something had adjusted. Subtle, internal. A memory reasserted. The sagas did not warn of this moment. No Skald had ever named the place he had walked, but he understood it now. The Fang was not just built upon legend. It had grown from something deeper. Beneath the bones of Asaheim's stone, beneath the carved roots of wolf and flame, there had been a wound, an absence mistaken for void, an echo misheard as origin. The mountain had never just been the fortress of Russ. It had been his echo chamber, and now the echo had answered. Vlka reached the Hall of Skulls. It was empty. No sagas rang from the speaking stones. No fires flared in the central pit. Gravy's seat stood bare, his staff resting beside it, upright and untouched. The chain of sagas that once draped the wall now coiled gently along the floor, its links no longer heavy. Runes once warm to the touch now shimmered faintly, as if the stories they had once borne had finished or moved on. Vlka stepped forward, placed one hand against the nearest stone panel. It did not respond with voice or vision. Instead, it released a warmth, brief, calm, like the breath of a storyteller finishing their final verse. He passed the gallery of ancestors. Not all statues remained whole. Some had cracked at the helm. Some had shed their frost entirely, their visages damp with melt that never dripped. One, the oldest, whose name had long been etched out by order of the Wolf Council, stood reborn. Its face was still incomplete. Its pose remained humble. But a new rune marked the base of the plinth, one that matched the basin's edge. Vlka nodded, not to the statue, but to the absence it marked. He moved onward. Outside, the wind no longer howled, it breathed. He stepped beyond the mountain's brow, where the horizon yawned wide and black beneath the aurora's flicker. The seas of Fenris curled at the edges of vision, frozen smooth like bone mirrors. No storms prowled. No stars wept. The moons passed overhead, but slower than before, or perhaps more purposefully. Their light did not fall. It hovered. Vlka stood still and waited. The echo came, not as cry, not as warning, but as confirmation. A resonance that slid between heartbeat and thought. No one else would hear it. No one else should. It was not meant for the chapter. It was not a saga for voices. It was a memory fulfilled. The Fang had not awoken. It had remembered. And Vlka had become its tongue. Behind him, nothing stirred. The vault remained sealed. The basin lay dark. Kaleg and Morda would not return, not because they had died, but because they had remained. Held now not in body, but in shape, echoes folded into the mountain's breath. They were not consumed. They were preserved. He did not mourn them. He carried them. Vlka turned his eyes skyward once more. The moons blinked behind shifting cloud light. For a breath, one darkened. Not eclipsed, just silent. And then from beneath the ridge, the final sound came. Not a howl, a breath. Drawn inward, not from lungs, from place. The Fang inhaled, not as a structure, as a living memory. The snow paused, mid-fall. Every flake hung for the width of a second, stretched too long. And in that pause, Vlka felt the pulse of the vault behind his ribs. A final rune burned into thought. The saga was over, and it had never been sung. Only remembered, only now, only here. He stepped forward, not toward destination, but toward continuation. The frost did not resist. The air welcomed him, not as priest nor warrior, but as kin. Some sagas end in fire, some in death, but this one ended in breath, and Fenris had begun to breathe again.